Hello, everybody out there. Tonight's topic is this new Disinformation Governance Board being created by the Biden administration. And with us is Kent Garrett, a long career in news production and as a reporter, working out of Washington, D.C. at one point, and also with the networks in New York. And also we have Mark Collingsworth, whose expertise is in finance, but also keeps an eye on world affairs and how that affects the economy. So tonight's topic, as I said, is this Disinformation Governance Board that the Biden administration is announcing to apparently curb disinformation ahead of the midterm elections. And also, interestingly enough, it's to target, to disabuse minority groups of disinformation, specifically the Hispanic populations among the before the midterm election. So there are people out there, critics already saying, oh, this is another way to control information and to censor anything that's contrary to the official Biden administration narrative. Kent Garrett, what do you think?
Well, first off, Larry, I think the word curb is not really correct. I mean, I think what they're talking about, from what I've read, is to sort of counter disinformation. They're not saying that they're not going to let the information get out there. The information is going to be out there, but it seems to me they're going to counter it. And they specifically talked about the area of immigration and, as you say, minorities. So I think the right is a little bit jumping on this. I mean, I saw a lot of stuff on the net from Fox News and those types. And I think they're sort of jumping on it to make something out of it that it really is not, from what I've read.
Well, Ken, I would think the key question here would be who decides what is disinformation and what is accurate information, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, but there are facts. 2 + 2 is 4. And when someone on the right says 2 + 2 is 6 or 7, I mean, that's incorrect information. That's disinformation. I mean, that's a little simplistic an example, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, it's going to be headed by this lady behind me, Nina Jankowicz, who said that before the election, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was, quote, a Trump campaign product. And there was nothing to it. Now, as it turned out, there's a lot to it. And what was reported by Fox and the New York Post and other news organizations, not necessarily in the mainstream, turned out to be completely accurate. So this is a woman, she's in her 30s. She promotes herself as an expert in disinformation, world renowned, she says, and she's going to be heading this critical approach to what the public knows. What do you think, Mark?
Well, personally, I'd like to see, all the information put out there. And if it's misinformation, let the other side get in there and show the facts and prove that it's wrong. Where I disagree here, I think the liberals are going to try very hard to suppress information. We've already seen the instance, with the Biden laptop with Hunter Biden. They went out of their way to suppress that. CNN is getting, their viewership is crashing because they're not putting both sides out there. They're only putting one side out there. So there's already a trend to suppress information and only let one side get to be put out there.
Yeah, Ken, as a longtime media person, news person, don't you find this somewhat alarming that a government agency, the Department of Homeland Security, no less, which is an enforcement agency, a law enforcement agency, is going to be deciding what is disinformation? Now, what kind of controls they're going to put on it, I don't know. But the very fact that it's a government agency and it's a law enforcement agency, not just some kind of a side agency that doesn't have any legal enforcement powers. What are they up to with this?
Yeah, but Larry, I think it's akin to an agency having a PR arm, public relations arm, or it's like the State Department. They do a conference or a press conference every day. You go and they put out their information. And my sense of what they're talking about, Biden's talking about, is that what it's going to be like. They're not it's not a situation of control. In other words, the disinformation or whatever it is going to be out there, and they're going to put out their information. Maybe some of their information is going to be disinformation as well. But I don't think it's a control issue.
Well, it's going to be under Alejandro Mayorkas,
Mayorkas, right.
the head of the Department of Homeland Security. And he was being grilled before Congress today, insisting that the southern border is closed, it's under control, and there's no problem. Now, really? I mean, if you look at the video that's being produced on Fox and other places that are not MSNBC or CNN, you see migrants pouring across the border every day, and the fentanyl traffic and human traffic is going along with that. So Mayorkas, I think, is putting out disinformation himself, and it's under his department. I mean, don't you find that a little bit alarming that this is going on? And also, this comes just a few days after Musk bought Twitter. So is this a reaction that they're afraid that Twitter now is going to be open to all viewpoints? So they've got to counter it now with this government agency, the Disinformation Governance Department. I mean, this seems purely a political move, and it's infringing, not because the government's involved. This is an infringement on the First Amendment.
But they're not, but Larry, they're not saying that you cannot. I agree with you. I think it's in response to the purchase of Twitter by, if that comes through, by Elon Musk. But I mean, I think the problem, if you want to simplify it, there is no longer a Walter Cronkite in this country that the public sees as objective, as totally fair all the time, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you might argue that he wasn't, but I mean, I think that was his perception. And we don't have that today. So I think the government, is struggling with how do you deal with this information. In other words, my feeling is that I think, in terms of the 230, the Section 230, I mean, I think that the Twitter and these social platforms should be on the same equivalency as publishers, as for example, the New York Times. So the New York Times puts out a disinformation story about me, or if it's more than disinformation, I sue the New York Times, and I'm probably sue the reporter. But right now, when YouTube puts out or Twitter puts out a defaming thing about me, I can't sue YouTube. I can maybe go after, the website guy or the person who put it out. But I mean, I think they should put all these social platforms on the same level equivalency as our newspapers, and actually make them publishers. You know what I mean?
Ken, I just find this, the slippery slope towards government control of information. I mean, what is so egregious with misinformation that the Biden administration has to curb? I mean, to me, most of the misinformation and disinformation is coming from the left and the Biden administration. And point out something that's so egregious that it needs this kind of a correction.
Well, and that's something, if I can just jump in here, you're right, Larry, the misinformation seems to be coming from the left. We already had the laptop thing was covered up. We had, just a few months ago where the left was talking about, the immigration officers were whipping immigrants trying to come into the United States on the horses. And then that's been proven inaccurate, which was misinformation from the left. There was another incident where someone—
Biden himself accused the border agents of doing that. He made a statement on that.
And refuses to even apologize for that. That's kind of now that's been brought out to the attention's been brought to it. They're now kind of sweeping it under the rug because they've been caught. Another incident, like, with the vaccines, someone had posted on Twitter, all they did was post, be careful, don't forget about what happened with the first polio vaccine, and Twitter took it down. The first polio vaccine was an absolute disaster. They had to take it off the market after 2 months because it was actually giving people polio. But Twitter viewed it as misinformation. that's an actual factual event that's actually on the CDC's website, but it was again suppressed by, the liberals.
Kent?
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, I've come to think that the laptop thing, the Biden laptop thing was, I mean, I'm not sure if I agree with it was a suppression, but I mean, I think it might have been a bad political, journalistic decision in terms of its importance and maybe not going after it and that sort of thing. But I mean, I don't think the government, I mean, you see, let me ask you this then. You guys feel that everything should be out there, period. And case closed, no content, moderation at all.
Well, I mean, child pornography should be banned. That shouldn't be allowed. Things of that nature. But I mean, we're talking about political opinions, even if they're extreme.
Right.
On one side or the other, let it flow. The real cure for disinformation is more information. You counter the argument with facts, and the left hasn't been doing that. All they've been doing is shutting down the other side. What are they afraid of? If they have the facts, it should be obvious. You present the facts, and then you could show how ridiculous the other side's argument is. They don't do that. They don't allow you to speak. This is what's going on more and more. I mean, this is a way of eroding the First Amendment. And now you have a government agency directly involved in this. And the government, First Amendment, government shall make no law regarding freedom of speech. I mean, this is contrary to the First Amendment, with the government being directly involved, a government law enforcement agency.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Where is this going to lead? We've been on this slippery slope for a long time, Ken. And sure, there's a lot of crazy stuff on the internet, and a lot of it, is too ridiculous even to discuss. But you don't curb that by shutting it down. You just show how ridiculous those arguments are, and that's not what's going on. And who's to decide what is disinformation? There's convenient political interpretations of what's disinformation, more and more so. And I'm not saying that this is all the Democrats and the left. That the Republicans and the right wing is guilty of that too. But this is a new element now, having a government law enforcement agency monitoring this, looking to see what individuals might be, according to the verbiage that's already put out there, which individuals might be heading towards radical, dangerous views. Not those who committed it or planning it, but could be heading towards that merely by what they're listening to on the internet and what they're saying over the internet. I mean, this is like Germany.
Let me ask you this, Larry. I mean, do you feel that Twitter was correct in taking Trump off?
No. The president of the United States?
No, but the president of the United States did incite a riot. I mean, that's what the courts have said.
Let me just throw something real quick. If that was really an insurrection, it's the first insurrection in history where the enemy didn't bring any weapons to overthrow people that had guns. There's no way you can call that an insurrection.
Well, what do you call it? What do you call it?
I call it people in a peaceful protest that basically trespassed.
Well, I call it a small part of the 100,000 people who showed up there became riotous, but that was a riot. It wasn't a planned insurrection. I mean, that's a ridiculous overstatement that it was an insurrection, and that was pumped up as a way of impeaching Trump for a second time.
But it was planned, Larry. Look at all the evidence from the January 6th committee. I mean, it was planned. It was strategized.
No,
I want to really throw this one in here really fast. When the FBI director was in front of the Senate just a month ago, Ted Cruz asked him, how many undercover agents did you have from the FBI that was inside the group that you are calling insurrection, and how many of those people actually made it look like there was an insurrection? The head of the FBI, he was asked 4 times, point blank, and he refused 4 times to answer the question, how many undercover FBI agents participated in the so-called insurrection?
Kent, this is what I think might have.
But Larry, let me ask you this one quick question then. Let's say Elon Musk, from what I've read, he feels that there should be more freedom of speech and expression on Twitter, and perhaps, I think the Democrat, or the fear that he's going to maybe let Trump come back on. What do you do if Trump comes back on and sends out a Twitter saying, folks, go to the Capitol and riot, and go to the Capitol and stop the Senate session, et cetera? What do you do about that? What happens to that? What do you do about that?
You arrest the former president of the United States for inciting a riot if he does that. There are already legal remedies for that.
Well, let me ask this question.
And you're going to prevent him from going back on just in case he does that? I mean, they could prevent me from going back just in case I come out with some wild conspiracy theory that some people might buy into. Where does it stop? Where do you draw the line?
Well, even on this, did Trump not get, when he gave his speech, did he not say everyone needs to go over peacefully and protest in front of Congress? He said that, but yet you have people on the left that are trying so hard to suppress that he actually said that. But it's facts, he did say that, and they're trying to turn it around.
This is what I think may have happened, might have happened. Of course, if this Disinformation Governance Committee gets its way, I won't even be allowed to say this possible theory. I'm not endorsing it by saying this is a possibility.
They're not saying you won't be able to say it, Larry. You'll be able to say it, but they will say something counter to what you said. They're not telling you not to say it.
According to what they've already put out, they're going to be monitoring individuals that may be slipping towards dangerous ideas.
But that's not the same as saying that you can't say it.
Well,
they're not saying that.
It's going to have such a chilling effect that I'm targeted, I'm being investigated, I'm being monitored. That's the way you shut down dissent, short of outright arrest at that point, which will come later. This is what's happened in other totalitarian societies. I mean, I think what might have happened on January 6th was Trump was suckered into this when they realized that he's going to have a lot of his supporters there. They put agitators in the crowd, FBI agents and others who stirred up the crowd and got some of the unruly part to riot and enter the Capitol building. So they purposely orchestrated this, stirred up the crowd so they'd have a second impeachment issue against Trump. And if you look at most of the video, most of these so-called rioters, violent people, were walking peacefully through the Capitol like they were on a tour of the Capitol. You could see them doing that. There were a few individuals that got out of hand, but the only person who died violently was Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by a security Capitol police officer who, by the way, a short time before, months before, had left a loaded revolver in the men's room, and he was still on duty after that egregious offense. So, I mean, there's two sides of the story, Ken, that hasn't been getting out because of this kind of censorship and shutdown.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, who decides what's information? You have a government agency now watching people who might be slipping into some bad ideas that could lead to violence or overthrow. I mean,
no, but Larry, don't you feel that facts exist?
They do, but let's present the facts.
Yeah.
Don't shut down somebody who's coming out with an erroneous statement. Counter that with the facts.
But that's what they're saying they're going to do. They're not telling you if you're going to say a non-fact. They're not telling you not to say what you're going to say. They're just saying that they're going to counter what they determined to be disinformation.
But that's not what they've done.
What they determined to be disinformation.
But I mean,
look at this woman who's going to be heading it. She's the one who denied that there was any validity to the Hunter Biden laptop story. Don't forget, Biden himself kept crowing about during the debates with Trump that 50 intelligence agency heads and other officials have said that this is Russian disinformation, nothing to it. They were all on board with the narrative. These 50 intelligence agencies high up in the CIA and other spy agencies couldn't determine that it wasn't Russian disinformation, that the Hunter Biden laptop actually contained incriminating information on there, including emails that show that that Hunter and his old man were both benefiting from Hunter's business deals in Ukraine and in Russia and in China. And that was shut down because it was disinformation. Shut down before the election. They didn't want that story to get out. I mean, we're already halfway to 1984, and this is another big step towards it, Kent. I mean, we've all been in the media, or you and I have at least, Kent. I mean, you know how this works. I mean, we had pressures just from our sponsorships and from the station managers and all that. There were certain limits. You can't offend somebody who might be a sponsor and all that. And we rebelled against that. Now, this is 10 times worse than that, to a huge degree worse. And people are saying, well, we got to control misinformation. Who's determining what is misinformation? Counter it with facts and back it up that it is a fact and not your interpretation that you'd like people to swallow.
Well, and just to add to the misinformation, we could spend an entire hour just talking about the Russian hoax that the Hillary campaign put together to try to make Trump look like he was a Russian secret agent. And that story now is falling apart. And the news outlets like CNN are still trying to avoid it, and it's just blowing up on them.
I mean, these examples were just presented, Kent. Don't you find those disturbing?
I mean, I just think it's very complicated, and B, I don't think that was not my interpretation of what I've read today about what the government is trying to do, what the Biden administration is trying to do. I don't think we're onto that onto that slope yet.
Well, from what they put out so far, what is your interpretation of how are they going to govern? This is misinformation, disinformation governance. How are they going to govern?
Well, I think it seems to me what they're going to do, if Fox News or some right-wing outlet comes out with a statement or a position that is non-factual, that is, let's say non-factual, this government organization, whatever they're calling it, is going to counter with information, with different information, with that they determine to be correct and not disinformation. I mean, that's what's done now, sort of.
But,
in terms of
it's not. I mean, look at the examples we've given. There's already been a huge amount of suppression of information as facts that the left's already tried to suppress. Now they're over here trying to create an enforcement agency now to take legal actions against people that talk about the.
Yeah, but I mean, the government did not suppress the Biden laptop. That was not a government issue.
Well, when the press secretary gets on TV and she's point blank asked by a reporter, and she says I forget the exact words. It's a Russian tactic to sway the election. When she says that, that's actually a statement from the White House that they're trying to disprove something or put misinformation out.
In fact, Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, said outright some months ago that they were in daily contact with Facebook and other social media sites, advising them what is disinformation and what should be avoided being posted. So they already had a direct involvement in that. And that's what we know about on the surface. That's what they've admitted to. I mean, this is really dangerous when the government tries to stop a free flow of information. Again, I've said this in the past, Thomas Jefferson, who pushed for the First Amendment, he hated the newspapers of his day. He said they were full of lies. They were after him, blasting him left and right. But he insisted on the free flow of information, no impingement by the government. He's saying that in balance, one newspaper will have one viewpoint, another newspaper will have another. In balance, that people can sift through it and decide. And the alternative would be just hearing government approved information. And how, can any of us trust the government to stay pure and principled in allowing us to view certain information and shut down other information? Will they always be even-handed and factual? It's never happened in history. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think we should have another session once we see what Biden does with this thing. I mean, no, I'm not saying, you know, I mean, I hear you, what you're saying, and I mean, I hear your concern, but I mean, I don't think we know enough right now to figure out what they're going to try and do and how they're going to actually run this disinformation thing.
All right, we'll do an update on this. But, you know, one thing I want to point out is how callous they've been about what's going on the southern border. First of all, denying that there's any problem. New York is saying, yeah, there's no problem. The border is closed. You can see thousands, or what they have, 2 million in the past year pouring over, and those are just
Right, 2 million, yeah.
I mean, you know, that's a secure closed border. They don't require them to be vaccinated, even though we had to go through hell and high water about the vaccine mandates and masks and all that. And also, there's a big increase now in fentanyl overdoses because that's going through the border. It's controlled by the drug cartels, and there's also a lot of human trafficking. That's all gone full blast now because of how they've opened the border. I mean, you know, the president, you know, is supposed to defend this country and the homeland, but the border is wide open. And look at the border agents. The Texas, I guess he was the Texas National Guardsman,
Yeah.
who drowned, saving 2 migrants who turned out to be drug dealers. And Psaki said, oh, well, you know, that's not under our auspices, that's not under our control. She said very callously, you know, that's a matter of the Texas National Guard. She dismissed it that way. I mean, you know, and by the way, that the guard who drowned was Black. Now, you know, where's all this thing about Black Lives Matter all of a sudden? I mean, this is how hypocritical this is, Kent. You know, they've got this political agenda and shutting down anything to the contrary. And you know, this is getting more and more controlled news, more and more George Orwell, 1984. And that, as Biden would say, that's not hyperbole. I'm not kidding. Here's the deal. We are headed towards 1984.
All right, let's meet next week.
All right, guys.
And we'll see what happens with the Biden thing.
Ken Garrett and Mark Collingsworth, thanks once again for being, and thank all of you out there for sticking with us for this, I think, a lively and informative.
Well, yeah, and it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is complicated.
See you guys. All right. Good night.
Yeah, good night.